Okay, I want to do a breakdown of this render right here, and there's three main things that I want to cover in this one. One is the buildings and just the general like base geometry of this scene. The second is the camera angle, and just it's kind of a weird angle, so just want to show you what's going on with that. And then the third thing is the lighting and just how I'm dealing with all the different neon signs and all that stuff. Okay, so if you haven't seen my video on the hologram shader, I'll link that below. You can go and watch that after. That will show you how to make these holograms from scratch. So this one is not going to cover the hologram shader. That is in the separate tutorial that I'll link below, which is the last video I posted on my channel. Okay, so let's talk about the buildings and just the general scene layout first, because there's a lot going on with this. It's from this angle looking up this like tube of buildings, which if we look at it in 3D, so I've kind of just blocked it out from the bottom up when I was making it. I just started with these four things right here, which were actually just simple buildings that I made a long time ago in a different project and then just brought them in here. So it was that I started with. And then when I got the camera angle sort of set up, not exactly like it was in the end, but just roughly from this angle, then it was a lot easier to go and block out the rest of the scene, because I kind of knew, okay, I want it to be like four buildings around the camera, looking up, and probably some neon stuff in there. I don't know exactly what yet, but something, and then like buildings going upwards. After I had that idea and just got it blocked out with some really basic shapes, then it was easy to go in and, you know, start just adding more and more stuff and piling more stuff on top of that and then adding variation to it. But the rest of this is like basically it's like that same chunk of buildings repeated upwards in just a square formation with some variation, with some stuff off to the sides, a couple of them deleted in the middle and then stuff replaced there, and then a couple of other buildings separately that I've just kind of intersected with those other ones. So you can see it's literally just like slapped right on there. These ones are actually from the video I did where I did a render in Eevee. I'm in cycles in this one, but these are from that video. If you want to see how I made these, that's in there. You can also download this because it was a free download on that blend file. So I'll link this below if you want this, plus a bunch of other building models and all the other free models I have available. I'll just put that in one link below. So if you don't want to make buildings, I have a bunch of packs of that. You can get that in the description for free. Okay, so I will do a quick demo of just showing some very basic building modeling that you can do. I have a full tutorial on making buildings, and again, you can watch that after if you want, but the basic idea here is it's a cube, kind of like this size, and then it's loop cuts. Let me just kind of go in here. Let's apply the scale first so that all the aspect ratios when I do this are going to be correct. It's, you know, get a reference image, so like go on Google and just look up a picture of a building, go on Google Maps and like go to China on Google Maps and just take screenshots of stuff there. So, like there's a bunch of ways to get reference images, but I'll just do a quick demo here of like some basic building modeling. What we might want to do is take this, maybe extrude. I can right click to cancel the transformation, but it's still in there. Scale it out a little bit. Maybe on these ones, let's add some loop cuts like this. Should probably do the same number on each side, but whatever. We can go in here, you know, face select mode, alt click on the edge, and we can select edges or select rows of windows like this. Let's go in, let's maybe apply the scale again just to make sure this is going to work properly. Maybe do like, I don't know, like I'm kind of making this up as I go along. One shortcut you may want to know is alt E to extrude faces along normals. Alt E to do that. And I'll let you bring it all in like that. You can maybe inset with I, hit I again to do the individual faces. We can maybe do that. Alt E, extrude faces along normals. Pull that in slightly. Maybe another one just for really unnecessary amount of detail. Alt E, extrude faces along normals. And that's kind of how I'm going about it, right? We have a building. For texturing this, it's like put a window material on the windows, which are already selected. If you accidentally deselect that and you want to get back to it, you can actually just click one of them, hit Shift G, and then coplanar. It's another useful shortcut. Not sure why I didn't do that for this one. You might have to just adjust the threshold on this and just get it to line up better. I actually don't know what's going on with this one. Maybe I messed something up, but Shift G, coplanar, just do that for all sides. And that's a really easy way to grab windows if you accidentally deselect them. Okay, what we can do now is just drop on like a concrete texture. I'm gonna go to the Polyhaven add-on and just search for concrete and just pick one of these here. Doesn't really matter which one you choose as long as you like how it looks. So concrete texture, go into edit mode, unwrap this with a cube projection. That's just a U, unwrap, cube project, scale that up, maybe load this texture in 4K. And then we just need some sort of glass material for the windows. So to get back there, I accidentally deselected them. So I'll just go and do that again. Okay, for the windows, we just want to select that and then make a new material here, or a new slot, hit assign, and then we need some sort of glass here. There's two ways you can do it. You can either do metallic up, roughness down, alpha down a bit, and then make the color darker. That's one way, and then that way there's no transmission, and you still get like reflections and stuff. It works pretty well. Or you can just use a glass. So that's like metallic 0, roughness 0, alpha 1, transmission 1. Just went really fast there, but you can rewind that if you want to watch those shaders. They're just very simple, either metallic that's transparent or actual glass. Either one works. And then that's kind of the building setup, right? You can go in, like on mine, I've modeled all these little racks and stuff. If we look at these racks, they're just cubes, right? Cubes stretched out, put into the shape of a rack. That's really what it is. It's literally like, it's very easy to make this stuff. You just look at some reference images, just find some pictures of buildings that have those kinds of racks on them, or just kind of make it up as you go. But it's literally like cube, duplicate, like put that into the shape of like a rack, and then like put a plane on top. It really doesn't have to be good, because these are going to be like very low poly, just background kind of things, and whatever, right? And then like do that, extend this out, put a couple of these, we'll just like duplicate that a couple of times, right? And then join it together, and then we can just put like a rust texture. I'll just search rust in here, like, I don't know, right? A metal, some sort of metal kind of looking thing, right? So just throw that on there. Do a cube project on that as well, right? Very basic, very low poly, but it works, and you can just throw it on buildings, repeat it as much as you want. And it's like, that's basically what I'm doing. You can do the same thing with AC units, different types of racks. Just repeat that process with a few different shapes, and then before you know it, you'll have like a fully decked out building that like looks good in a render. So I don't really love this texture. I'd probably swap that out, but you get the point, right? That's my building technique right there. And then you can either join this together, array it, do whatever you want. There's a bunch of ways to get it just extending upwards. You can just manually repeat it or whatever, but that's kind of the baseline of what's happening here. I'm going to delete that and then just go back and kind of show you what's going on here. So that's like the basic outline of the scene is made up of chunks of that, right? And if we look at that in rendered view, let's just kind of take a look at that and see how that's interacting with everything else. I'm going to go to the world settings and just take out the background, which was not supposed to be in there. That's just for the demonstration I was doing. Okay, let's actually take a look at the camera angle here, and I'll show you the lighting in a second and how that's kind of interacting with the rest of the buildings, and then the whole scene will hopefully make a bit more sense after that. Okay, let's talk about the camera angle here, because this is a bit of an extreme camera angle, and it's kind of an interesting perspective, having it way down, looking up, but then wide angle. So I'll show you all the settings for that and what's going on with the camera, because it is kind of a fun angle to do like this. So if you don't know, the default focal length for the Blender camera when you make a new scene is 50 millimeters. So that's pretty zoomed in, and in a shot like this, you're gonna have a hard time getting in all the stuff that's around, like wider out in the scene, if it's too zoomed in, because if there's a floor underneath it, you can't back up the camera that far. You can see it's right hitting the floor already, so I have nowhere to put it if I'm gonna back it up. Yes, I could delete the floor and then move it back, but then it would be from the perspective of like through the ground, which wouldn't make sense. So your only option here is to zoom it out. So remember, zooming out and backing up the camera are not the same thing. They're going to do different things. So if I just start zooming this out to, I don't even know what I had before, 19 millimeters, you can see here, there's around 50, the default. I'm zooming it out all the way down to 19. So the focal length here in millimeters, you might not know what that means. It just means the zoom level. So the default zoom level is 50. I've zoomed mine out to 19. If you go too low, like under 15, you're going to get, that's starting to get very, very wide. Below 10, you're getting to like full fisheye lens. And then past that, it's just completely unrealistic, which, could be fun, but it's like, you're really pushing it at that point. So I'm still going quite wide at 19 millimeters, but it's not so absurdly wide that it's just ridiculous. And then if we look at the actual angle here, one annoying thing about this is I've rotated the camera at this really messed up angle, and that means every time I leave the camera view, my view is actually crooked, so I have to hit like 1 or 3 on the keyboard to go to front view, and then it'll straighten it out. But that's kind of a side problem. So I actually had another one where it was I actually had it straight and then rotated it sideways on the y-axis. I think it was the y-axis, yeah, at the very end, because it was just too annoying to work with. Okay, so if we actually look at the angle here, here's the ground right here, okay? That is ground level, that plane I just added, and we're like 2 inches off the ground. So not the most realistic camera angle. It's kind of hard to get your camera that low. Could work, and it doesn't really matter here because you can't actually see the ground. So, you know, there could be some, it's unclear what's happening there. It's unclear how close the ground is exactly here. It is clear that we're somewhat close to the ground, but it's not clear exactly how close. So that's why it was okay for me to put it like unrealistically close to the ground, because you can't really tell in this render. You'll notice here, you actually cannot see the floor, which is interesting. Usually in my renders, I like to see the floor, but sometimes it's fun to just point the camera straight up and have no floor visible at all, no ground debris, no stuff that's like close to the ground at all, and just have it at a crazy angle that's just straight up or straight down or something. The other thing here is, if you look at the Y rotation, rotation Y, we're at -7 degrees. So if we put that back to 0, that's kind of a more normal angle where the camera is straight up and down. It's just tilted upwards a bit. This one is actually tilted upwards and sideways a bit. So the camera is actually not level with the horizon now, which is fine. It's, you know, in a crazy shot like this where it's just so much happening and there's all these, you know, crazy holograms, crazy angles, crazy colors already, I think it's fine to like go a bit crooked on purpose and just add to that sense of overwhelmingness. And that's kind of why I'm doing that, is it just made it feel a bit cooler. It's also a little bit more in line with some of these parallel lines. So I don't know. It's when you can't even see the horizon, it's completely fine to just go crooked if you want. It's not really a problem to do that. The main issue with going crooked is if you have a strong horizon line in the render, like you literally have like a horizon in the distance, and then you go crooked with that, then it'll probably look bad. But if you can't even see it and it's just chaos anyways, you're not really going to be messing it up by making the camera crooked like that. So it's just right there like that, and that's the angle. Is it just upwards, crooked, wide, down low, pointing not super upwards, but pretty upwards like that. Okay, let's get to the lighting, because the lighting is pretty chaotic in this one. There are some things I'm doing to help manage that chaos, which I'll get to in a minute, but let's just kind of go over this here. Okay, so obviously there are a lot of holograms with that shader that I just showed you. All these, the cans on top, the fish, the glowing Chinese lanterns, all that is that same hologram shader with maybe some minor variation on the color or some very slight differences, but it's that. There's also these advertisements and kind of like, you know, Chinese signs and just random pictures on the wall. There's a lot of that too. And there's not really any actual lights in the scene, like actual, you know, light bulbs that you would add with like, you know, in here with the lights section. There's a couple, but they're not really doing anything. Like there's one way up at the top. You can see it right here, shining a little bit there. That is like 1% of the lighting though, and it's pretty optional for that to even be there. And if I took it away, it wouldn't really make a difference. So almost all the lighting is actually coming from the actual holograms and neon signs in here, which I usually don't do in renders unless it's like a very chaotic cyberpunk render, which obviously this is. So I usually don't light things with emissive shaders is what I'm saying. Usually for the lighting, I will use actual lights, but in this case, it just, with a cyberpunk render, it's just kind of how it works out. You just have so many of these that that's the lighting, you know? So if I kind of break this up, there's kind of 2 sections. If I hide all of the holograms, here's what's left. So I'm using my technique of putting an image of a bunch of advertisements. If I just go to the UV editor and just kind of look at this, this is actually Japan and the rest is China. So I was trying not to mix them too much, but you can't really see these ones, so it's okay. But point is, picture of some sort of advertisement on a plane. You run that image into the emission color and the emission strength or alpha, depending on what you want. They'll do almost the same thing in this case. And then you can do the same thing mixing in some other texture with, like with that hologram shader, I mixed in that code image. With this one, we're mixing in a wave texture, which is just a node in Blender that gives you these lines here. You can scale that to whatever you want. So that's a fun one to do as well. Same thing, mix color node, switch it to multiply, put the new texture in slot B, original image in slot A, that goes to the emission strength, and you're good to go. Okay, so with an image like this, I've talked about this before, so I'll just be brief here. It's nice to have them with tons of different signs in it, and that way you can just duplicate, shift this to a different part of the image, and you have a brand new set of signs that you can just straight away use. No need to do all this stuff with making a new texture and making unique copies and bringing in new images. So this is just a stock photo that you can find on Unsplash. They're very easy to find. If you just Google, like, go onto any stock photo site, Pexels, Unsplash, Pixabay, whatever, and just in the search bar type in like neon signs China or advertisements Japan. Like, you'll find a bunch of stuff very easily if you just search for it. Okay, so if I hide all of, just to make the lighting a bit more clear what's happening here, if I hide all of these accent lights, I'm calling them, there's some emissive surfaces behind glass, there's some neon signs and advertisements like with the technique I just showed you, and that's pretty much it. If I hide all that stuff, here's what's left. It's not really anything. So the lighting is two things. It's holograms and neon signs, and that's pretty much it. You can see there's that area light up there, not really doing anything. This here is actually, this has the hologram shader on it, funny enough, some of the Chinese architecture. So you can kind of just put that on whatever and it can work. Looks kind of interesting there. And then there's some random emissive lights inside the buildings, but pretty much dark. And then the holograms, and so that's holograms only. And then the accent lights, which I'm counting as like all the advertisements and little signs that are just here and there. All that stuff is coming together to create kind of like the main lighting. So it's really chaotic, and when you have a cyberpunk render like this where it's just so many lights everywhere, you got to be really careful because it's so easy to just wash out the whole image, make it way too bright and just too colorful and too much light everywhere, and that just it just doesn't make it feel interesting anymore. It just is like you go past a certain level where you're now subtracting quality from the image by adding more stuff. So you want to try and have areas of empty or dead space. Like, here, there's just kind of nothing there. Yeah, it's a building, there's a texture, but it's pretty easy to look at and understand that it's just like a wall. It's a wall. There's not that much happening. Same thing with these panels. Big open space in a lot of these areas where it's just like not that much happening. That's one really important thing to have in these images, is breaking up the complexity with holograms and colors and lights with just empty space. Another thing I'm doing is trying to pay attention to, I'm actually going to move to Photoshop for this. Okay, so there are some things in the composition here that are doing a surprising amount to actually make the image look better, but they're pretty simple. So one is the kind of like visual flow and where the leading lines and naturally forming lines in the picture are guiding you and guiding your gaze. So if you've never heard of this before, this is a compositional tool that you can use. It's a real effect. If you can go back and look at paintings that are 500 years old and they're using this because it works. But basically, if you have any naturally occurring lines in the picture, your eyes are going to naturally latch onto that and follow it one direction or another. So you can use this to your advantage and actually subconsciously guide people's gaze towards and away from certain points. Okay, so for example in here, if we look at the buildings, there's a whole bunch of, first of all, the point of convergence of all of the buildings, if we just kind of follow up all these lines converging where there's all the buildings up here, it's all going upwards. Same thing with the pipes down here. Everything is kind of just like going up. The pillars, everything's kind of going up this direction, and also kind of like around, down, and then like back, up this way. Same thing with the fish, all kind of like leading you kind of like up and then like around to this area here. Everything's kind of like pointing in that direction. If you just kind of look at the naturally forming lines and where it's flowing, if you kind of imagine it as water, maybe I'm looking into this a little bit too far, but if you kind of imagine just the natural flow of the image, it's kind of like going, like this. If we kind of just look at this, right? It's all kind of just spiraling and converging on this general area. So that brings me to my next point, which is having a hierarchy in terms of the importance of objects. So the reason I'm kind of trying to get your gaze to all flow towards this point here is because that's probably the most important thing here. If I was to rank the objects, just various different objects in the scene in terms of like how important they appear in the picture, probably number one at the top of that list is like this big glowing can thing right here, this advertisement. Next on it would probably be the glowing fish. And then third below that would probably be like this, other stuff that's like not as important. Not to say it doesn't matter, but it's just, if we were to rank them in a hierarchy of like, what is the most important thing, or at least the most important feeling thing in this particular picture, it's probably this is number one at least. And maybe this is tied or number two. Okay, so the reason you want to do that and get a hierarchy established in terms of like ranking the objects in terms of priority is because if you have equal importance on every single object, anyone looking at the picture will not have an easy time finding where to look, and that makes it annoying and uncomfortable to look at, and literally creates like a pain signal in your brain and is just not pleasant. So when you're making artwork, chances are you probably want it to be nice to look at, and that's a way to make it nicer is just like separate out the objects into high priority and low priority objects. And there's a bunch of ways you can do that. For example, one way is just making it brighter. So this thing, pretty damn bright, glowing, highly saturated, and color contrast too, where it's kind of a different color than the rest of the stuff around here. That's one way. It's just like brighter, more colorful, and glowing. Another thing is literally just placing that object higher up in the picture. If you just look at the actual like in terms of like the height of each pixel where these things are falling, so this is probably higher than anything else that's anything else that's glowing nearby. There's some stuff up here, there's some fish or whatever, but those are like darker and smaller. This is like the highest big glowing thing in the picture. So that's one way that you can make things actually feel more or less important, is literally just place them higher or lower in the frame. So there's things down here that are like, this would probably attract a lot of attention. That's why I'm strategically placing it like down low in the corner of the picture. Same thing with this here. If that was dead center up here, that would feel more like the main thing, but making it darker, lower down in the picture, off to the side, all of that is helping to make it feel lower down on that hierarchy of importance of objects. And that lets me kind of separate this out a little bit more clearly so that it's easier to know where to look when you're seeing the picture for the first time. That's what a focal point is just the point of interest, point of focus. This thing is also placed on, if we look at the rule of thirds grid, kind of lined up with that, but it's actually more lined up with the golden ratio, which, I don't know, if you look up golden ratio, you're going to see this spiral everywhere. I don't think you need to start doing this and like putting fucking spirals and everything and lining it up with all these, like, it's not that important. But if you look at the grid here of like these like the rule of thirds looking grid, the rule of thirds is actually just outside that. The golden ratio is just pushed inwards a little bit more. This is lined up with that, right? At least the focal point is, right? So you don't have to line up everything. This wasn't intentional. There's a lantern that was not intentional. That doesn't matter. What matters is the big glowing thing is like kind of in that zone of the rule of thirds or golden ratio grid intersection there. So that's just a nice place to put things. It's not, you don't have to use it. It's, if you want to have it centered or whatever, you can do that. It's just, it often feels like a very natural place to put an object of importance, like the focal point on that rule of thirds or golden ratio grid intersection there. Okay, so that's pretty much all I want to talk about for this one. I hope that was a useful breakdown, both in terms of the technical Blender stuff and then also some of the compositional things that are happening to help manage the chaos of this one. If you liked this video, you might want to go and check out the Cyber Environments course. That'll teach you how to make these kinds of renders, and there's, step-by-step full guides on how to do it all. Comes with a bunch of asset packs to help you do it as fast as possible, but it'll also teach you how to model all the stuff along the way as well. So that's my number one recommendation for if you want to learn how to make Cyberpunk renders, is the Cyber Environments course. There's a link below to it if you want to check that out. Other than that, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in some other video.